I saw a post on Manute Bol the other day which inspired me to make this short video talking about what his career could have been. You see, I saw this post, and in it was talking about his college coach in Cleveland, and when Manute arrived to Cleveland, the coach asked him how old he was, and Manute Bol didn't know. You see, he grew up in a place in Sudan where people didn't keep track of age in the same way we do in the West. So when the coach asked Manute Bol how old he was, Manute literally had no idea because it wasn't something they tracked. So the coach just gave him an age that made him just young enough to play college ball, and then go on to be eligible for the NBA, which all worked out well and good for Manute, but in reality, the coach has since stated he thinks Manute Bol may have been 35 to 40 years old when he started playing NBA basketball, and may have been in his 50s by the time he retired, which really got me thinking, this is a dude who in his career, let's say Manute Bol was 40 years old when he started playing in the NBA. He still led the league in blocks in 2 seasons, and he also led the league in defensive box plus minus in 2 seasons. And by the end of his only 10-year career, Manute Bol finished his career with the second highest career block percentage in NBA history at 3.3 a game, as well as the third highest playoff block percentage at 2.7 a game. And by the time he retired, if you were curious, he was also 18th all-time in regular blocks. So this dude was a defensive monster. He was 7'7", had almost no offensive game whatsoever except for an insane three-point shot where he just two-handed took the ball up behind his head and threw it at the basket, and it miraculously went in when he was hot. An insane player, right? One of the strangest players in NBA history. What if this dude started playing basketball at, like, his mid-teens? Like, let's not even say that he was one of the American prospects from the modern day, right? Where you get these kids who are literally training since around the time they're old enough to walk. Their dads are really into basketball, their uncles, or some coach sees them because they're a really tall first grader or whatever, right? Let's not even say he was like that, but let's say he was like Joel Embiid or Hakeem Olajuwon, where there's this kid in another country who's like 14, 15 years old. He's really, really tall, and some NBA person sees him and is like, hey, you should play basketball. And so he gets a couple real years as a teenager to train. He goes to an American high school for a year. He goes to an American college for a year or two. And then he comes into the NBA around 20 years old. If Manute Bol had done that, what an insane player this man could have been. With actual weight training for his 7'7" frame, this guy was already blocking the crap out of shots and managing to play 10 seasons, despite the fact that he was old as dirt in NBA standards. This man may as well have been a million in NBA years. If he was drafted at the age of 40, that's absolutely crazy. This dude could have easily played 15 to 20 seasons in the NBA with proper training from the get-go and starting at a normal player's age. And what kind of a player could he have been? I mean, we saw his whack three-point shot, and as ridiculous as it looked, it did go in at times, so it's very possible he could have learned to be a shooter. Now, given his era, maybe it's not that likely, but you've also got a guy here who was able to very occasionally score points with his height alone. In his first couple seasons, he was averaging 3 or 4 points a game, which sounds pathetic, and in some ways it is, but this is a dude with no real basketball training at all, who again was extremely old, number one, and extremely skinny, number two. He, grew up in somewhere in Sudan where he wasn't exactly like working himself into proper athletic shape all the time like any college player would be. This man could have been significantly heavier and significantly more muscular specifically. He could have been out there posterizing people all the time. He could have been running up and down the court, catching lobs all over the place. Like, who knows what Manute Bol could have looked like if he had been able to receive the same benefits as everyone else of his era. He doesn't even need, like, 2020 athletics and medication, but just the type from the 1980s. It just really interests me in what Manute Bol could have been. I think this man could have been one of the greatest centers of all time if he had gotten the same opportunity as all the other NBA greats. If he had started young, been able to train his body, been able to actually work on his game, this man could have been an all-time center. Very easily could have been seen as one of, if not the best defensive players of all time. Being as good as he was defensively, the way he was physically, this dude could have been even more of a monster on that end, and he could have been a pretty decent scorer too, because in the 1980s, 1990s, it's not like you needed to be some kind of god-tier post scorer to get buckets when you were 7'7". He very well could have stayed on the floor with just a decent hook shot and the athleticism to run and dunk and catch lobs. Really interesting career to think about, just it is for me at the very least. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to throw it out there. Manute Bol could have already had one of the most interesting and strange careers in NBA history, and he could have had an all-time great Hall of Fame career had he gotten the same chance as so many other players.